Have a seat.
Thank you.
Avinash.
Morning.
Morning. Morning. So Avinash, you're from Mumbai, Maharashtra.
So I'm from Karnataka,
But
but
you
I
are
was
settled
born
in
in
Maharashtra.
Bombay.
Born in Maharashtra.
Yes.
And you've done your LLB Arts and Law.
BA LLB, honors from Bangalore.
Okay. And you're fond of competition and arts, antitrust.
Yes.
Okay. And your optional is law.
Yes.
Okay. So tell me, Avinash, can you, when you look back at India's history, can you give me an understanding of what is a proactive governance, what is reactive governance, and what is inactive governance? And can you give some examples of these three forms of governance?
So I'll start with proactive governance.
Okay.
Proactive governance, if I have to, at the very outset, when we received independence, we had an inflow of refugees, and resettling over 1 million refugees that came in was a big question. And I think we saw proactive governance where the refugees were successfully rehabilitated. And that is one success of India's policy. If I have to say about inactive governance, we saw a governance failure during the drought years before the Green Revolution. I think that is one where the third five-year plan failed, and due to war and various crises, we were not able to address it. Now we learned from it, and we came better out of it. And in terms of inactive governance was the third one, right, sir? If I may clarify, the reactive governance.
The third one is inactive.
Yeah, this was the inactive one, the failure. Coming to reactive governance, I think that comes from our liberalization time, where I think we reacted to the headwinds, global headwinds, and failure of foreign exchange reserves, and we brought in a new whole set of policies that was reactionary rather than led by the policymakers.
Okay. Now, if I give you three examples, would you tell me which one of them falls in which category? Now, Rajiv Gandhi's introduction of computers in this country was a proactive or reactive?
So it was proactive.
Proactive. COVID-19.
So it was reactive.
Reactive. And the various scams which happened in UPA 2.
So it was not governance. I think it was a failure of governance.
So it was inactive.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, if I ask you this thing, there is someone by the name of Prashant Kishore, and he's very much in the news for the last few days. Why? And who is he?
So he's a political strategist. He has worked for the TMC in West Bengal, where he was credited for the results. Currently, he is working for the Congress party and planning to revive the fortunes of Congress party in India.
Okay. Now, supposing you were to pick up the best practices from some of the states in the country, which states and which practices would you like to pick up for your own state?
So I think the education model of Delhi, the Union Territory of Delhi, is something that can be replicated in Karnataka, especially in terms of how a healthy competition where the government schools have taken a lead in terms of infrastructure, in terms of I have recently had to visit a government school that had a well-maintained basketball court in Delhi. I think that is one policy that I think Karnataka can emulate.
Any other states?
So there is this policy I recently read about. This is from the state of Gujarat, where the investment summits have been recently conducted, and the gift city that Gujarat is pioneering in association with the central government. I think even Karnataka's coastal districts such as Mangalore can also benefit from similar policies and similar investment zones.
Okay, my last question to you. What is aid to civil authorities, and in which context it is generally spoken to? And can you give some examples of aid to civil authorities?
So I'm not aware, but I may. Can I take a guess as to?
It has something to do with Army, Air Force, aid to the civil authorities. Which are the situations in which the aid to the civil authority is given?
So there is an act that maintains when the military establishment can come in aid. I'm not aware of when and which situation.
Many times, if you are posted as collector, you will be requiring the help of the Army, the Air Force.
Yeah.
So, which are those situations where you will need that?
So certain situations I can think of is if the law and order situation goes beyond the control of civil authorities. Second is during disasters, when you need disaster relief and the NDRF and the local establishment need support. Another could be during, for example, during the pandemic, if we have to, we need additional resources such as hospitals and need to be created, we can use the military infrastructure. These are the three.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Avinash V.
Hello, sir.
What do you stand for?
So it's my father's name, Vittal.
Okay. First of all, congrats, your first chance,
Yes.
and that too through arts.
Yes.
Rare combination.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. You will see when you go for your foundation course that majority of them are from science background, professionals. Your list of interests and hobbies I was looking at, I think UPSC is going to spend for 60-70% of their time on this. Yeah?
Yes, sir.
You are talking of writing and acting in street plays. Yeah?
Yes.
What is the smallest skit you can think of for any subject of your choice? In 3 sentences, can you tell me?
So, the smallest skit I did was on child marriage. We just made a loud noise. We acted out a child marriage. And just to catch audience attention, we acted as if we were arresting people from the crowd. This is
You
to
were
arresting the people from the crowd.
arresting.
Yes, sir. This is to bring home the message that not only indulging in child marriage, but attending a child marriage wedding, even being present there, you could be arrested for abetment. That's just to push through the message. This was a small skit that we.
Good message.
Yes.
I think keeping in view the audience, otherwise you will be rated as a tough administrator. Straight away arresting, nothing short of that. Pro bono. You think it's a practical concept?
Yes, definitely. I think if in the sense of pro bono practice of law,
Yeah, of course.
yes, I think it's definitely a practical concept because the right to receive legal aid is a directive principle, and lawyers themselves have a monopoly over practice of law, and they must be duty bound to practice even the weakest of the vulnerable sections of the society.
And you have been convener legal services clinic.
Yes, sir.
What is NLS?
So
School.
it's my university,
Yes,
national law.
I think there is a law also whereby most of the governments are supposed to provide this assistance to the marginal.
It's Act of 1987. Yes.
Yeah. So that is not effective enough.
So in the sense, I think it lacks in the implementation. While the law is very robust, it mandates the legal services clinic of every universities. It mandates legal aid clinics in prison. It has an advocacy a program for advocacy also.
So that is where your community comes forward to offer
Yes, sir.
services.
Yes.
And that works effectively. What percentage roughly? What percentage of legal community in your area? Some approximate. Yes.
So we have around 30 lawyers on the panel. They are our alumni and some lawyers, prominent lawyers. We forward the cases that we get. However, if you look at the national level, only 5% of the cases go through legal aid, whereas over 60% of India's population cannot afford the fees there are. Therefore, there is some lacuna in terms of
Brief. I had asked for
implementation.
percentage.
So we have 30 lawyers on the panel, and all the cases that come to us, if they're eligible for legal aid,
You are one of them.
So
You are one of them.
So as a student, I'm a paralegal. I worked as a paralegal, but I've not taken up cases as a lawyer.
Okay. That's good. Thank you very much. And my last question. One of your choices, top choices, is the IPS.
So foreign service.
No, I said one of your top
Yes,
choices.
yes, IPS.
Yeah?
Yes.
IPS.
Yes.
I believe there is a old practice in law that shaving is mandatory for the police department. I don't know, I mean, who all are included. So tell me, who all are included? Whether IPS officers are also included, and how practical it is to make a law like this. Is it implementable?
So I'm not aware of the law and whether it mandates, but I think it's practical. There are certain exemptions based on religious or personal conscience if someone does not want to shave. But in order to maintain the discipline of the force, I think it is practical to have such a rule.
There are some rulings also by the higher judiciary on this.
Yes.
You think it's implementable? But what do you see on the ground mostly?
So yes, while most of the officers are well shaven and well groomed, even if someone wants to keep long hair, I think it should be groomed, maintaining.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Avinash, you are from NLS Bangalore.
Yes.
You have studied law.
Yes.
And what attracts you to IFS or civil services after having done law?
So I think it's a privilege of being a diplomat that actually made me write this exam. In university, I was exposed to some distinguished diplomats. I interned at the Ministry of External Affairs, and I thought this is a job I would like to do for the country.
You were just talking about pro bono lawyers. Is government providing any incentive to pro bono lawyers so that they can help the poor and the underprivileged?
So in terms, there is the District Legal Services Authority that empanels certain lawyers who are duty bound to provide pro bono services. However, the fees in terms are very minuscule. It's around 500 rupees per case in Karnataka. One way I think the High Court itself is promoting pro bono lawyering is while elevating advocates to senior advocates, their pro bono profile is seen. And this is one way, is one incentive for people, at least the top advocates, to do pro bono.
So it helps them in getting elevation in High Court. And what is your opinion about permitting foreign law firms in India?
So I think they
I think
definitely.
there was a lot of opposition from the bar as well as the bench. I don't know, but bar definitely.
So, I think they should be allowed to practice. I think that will bring new ideas, that will bring new investments. And today, most international practices are across borders. It will also allow Indian law firms to go to other countries that have reciprocating clauses. Therefore, I think more competition in the field will only improve the quality of service.
Are you happy with the judicial practices here in India? There's a lot of delay, that is being noticed in resolving cases. 10-year-old cases are still going on. So, what steps would you recommend to the government for removing delay? The courts easily provide, they grant you adjournments just for the sake of asking, and adjournment means next case hearing is on 1 year later or whatever. So is there any way to stop this practice?
So I think with the limited resources, the judiciary is doing a good job. There are over 3 crore cases. With regard to the delay and what is the cause of it, firstly, there is a tendency of over-criminalizing in Indian legislations that lead to multiple cases being filed. We have only 20 judges per lakh population. The average across the globe is over 50. Adjournments in certain cases are inevitable and are sought by lawyers because evidence has to be produced or some argumentation on some issues has to be made. However, yes, I think that is one issue that has to be looked out. And one way we can address that is having strict time limits for disposal of cases. We have seen that in IBC, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, that has 6 months or 180 days time limits. Similar time limits in other legislations should help address that issue.
There not be any monitoring agencies, because the trial mostly takes place in the lower subordinate courts. There is a lot of corruption also. Give the money and the judgment is granted very easily. So should not the higher court, say high court, devise some mechanism to monitor the progress of these cases?
Yes, sir. I think a threshold should be set. If a case has crossed certain threshold, for example, 3 years, 5 years, and most high courts today have set such a threshold, where immediately if a file that is pending for over 5 years goes before the high court for review, the administrative judge of high court for review, such thresholds can at least address. With regard to corruption, I think a robust screening, monitoring, and at least a desk where complaints regards to corruption can be made can address that issue.
Do you think that the courts enjoy independence?
So I think independence is a necessity, and because if the courts are to give judgments without fear or favor, we cannot do away with independence of the judiciary.
When we talk of Supreme Court, they appoint themselves. I think perhaps India is the only country where courts appoint themselves. And there is a talk about replacing the collegium system of selections by the NJAC.
So the collegium.
Why does the Supreme Court oppose this suggestion?
So I think if you look at it the historical perspective, Article 124 is silent, as it just says that the president shall appoint the judges with consultation with the various other judges. However, the collegium system was instituted based on the history of the emergency and the institutional failure. And it's been over 3 decades, and yes, it is due for reforms. And the NJAC was one amendment that was brought in 2016. However, the court brought specific concerns with regard to vague provisions such as eminent persons on the panel of NJAC. If those were addressed, I think we can at least achieve a consensus as to the alternatives to the collegium system. Thank you.
Avinash, let's start with some law questions. Can there be a writ petition against a public sector undertaking?
Yes, so there can be a writ petition.
In what circumstances?
Sir, Article 226 of the Constitution is very wide. It allows, if for example, if someone is appointed at the higher position as the MD of the public sector undertaking violating some laws,
okay,
or someone has been removed from job and their certain rights have been violated without due hearing.
So in just one word, what would be the precise description of the situation? If it is performing the public duty.
Function, yes.
Public function. Okay. What is colorable legislation?
So colorable legislations are legislation that aim to achieve what are directly not allowed through indirect means.
Okay. And rule of mischief?
So I'm not aware of rule of mischief.
Okay. That intention of the parliament or the legislation must be gone into while interpreting a rule.
The laws.
Okay. International law is the vanishing point of jurisdiction, the jurisprudence. Do you agree?
So I don't think so. I think times have changed. This statement was made a century ago.
Okay.
But now after World War II, you have institutions such as UN. You have ICJ that produces judgments. And you have a litany of cases that have clearly established certain areas of international law for sure. These are international environment law.
But if you link it with the enforcement, China refusing to abide by the International Court of Justice's judgment.
Yes. So yes, certain countries have had the exceptions. However, across this we have seen that countries do abide by international law, and at least if they are not following it, they try to word their actions on the basis of international law.
Do you think that the role of governor has become quite controversial in the recent times? What are the reasons for it?
So, governor was envisaged as a constitutional post. However, we are seeing that certain instances, governor is acting as an agent of center, where various legislative measures of the legislature are not approved. In the appointment of chief ministers, governors violating precedents. These are certain issues that create conflict between the state legislature and governor, and therefore this issue is in controversy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Avinash, before we send you to the waiting room for a few minutes, just one parting question which I wanted to ask you is that you have talked about monopolistic tendencies. Now, can you name one particular business house which has been regularly indulging in monopolistic tendencies, and it has literally eaten away all other telecom companies, and ultimately then once they may have achieved this monopolistic tendency, then they start raising their tariffs and so on, and how it can be corrected?
Sir, Reliance Jio, a recent entrant into the market, was recently accused of predatory pricing. However, I don't think so it is monopolistic, because as long as it was an entry scheme for them to get foothold in the market, it was allowed. However, today they have crossed the 40% threshold, and today they are under strict review that if they go beyond the threshold pricing, they will be fined by the Competition Commission.
But if they have gone into predatory tendencies, automatically it will lead to monopolistic environment, isn't it?
So, the legislative architecture was changed. The Monopolistic and Restrictive Trade Practices Act was changed, and today we have the Competition Act. The Competition Act, unlike the MRTP Act, does not ban being the monopoly itself. It rather bans abuse of monopoly. And abuse of monopoly has two conditions. First, the entity should be dominant in the market. Until very recently, Jio was not dominant. And secondly, it should abuse through predatory pricing. Currently, if Jio indulges in the same practices that it did while entering the market, it will be a violation of the Act.
So right now you think that it is not violating any particular law?
So currently, as per the CCI's findings, it has not, and even I, in my personal opinion, I believe it is not.
Okay, thank you. So Avinash, we'll take you back. We'll call you again for feedback.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Come, Avinash, have a seat.
Thank you.
Avinash, when is your interview fixed?
May 24th.
May 24th. Okay, so that's you have sufficient time at your disposal. Second thing, let me ask you, this is the first time you are going to appear at an interview of the CSE?
Yes.
All right. Now, tell me, how do you think you performed at this mock interview? Your own opinion about it.
So I think I didn't do the best I could have done.
Okay, which are the areas where you think you could perhaps perform better, or where you need to probably study slightly more?
So some questions with regard to legislative questions were asked. I could not answer, which I should have known. I think I should brush up on these areas.
Okay, so Avinash, you are good. There is no doubt about it.
Thank you.
Let me tell you first of all your strengths. Your strengths are that you are mentally alert while coming up with the answers, questions, and you had a critical power of assimilation. So you could understand the question, analyze the question, and you were able to churn it inside your head and then come out with the answer. So analytical powers were again there. I'll come to some other points which will do you a lot of good. The third is your answers were clear, slightly longer, but logical. But answers can be brief to the point. Okay, but otherwise they were clear. Then your knowledge of current affairs was also fairly good, and your balance of judgment was also all right. Except I will tell you what exactly you need to practice while coming out with the answers. Then there was no point of time did we find that you were trying to bluff. So there was honesty in your answers. Wherever you did not know, you were not admitting that. So you said that you did not know. Communication skills are fine. So your articulation, communication skills are fine, except that the body language or the non-verbal language is as important as the verbal. So while giving the answers, the questioner who has asked the question, the panelist, whereas the 80% of the time your eye contact should be with him, but you should scan the entire board almost 20% of the time, left to right, right to left, occasionally. That keeps everyone in sort of that you are listening to and you are attentive to him also or her. So that is there. And then of course confidence was there, you were confident, and the provocative questions also sometimes we asked you, you were able to come out with them. Now let me tell you the methodology of answering the question. Number one is that generally people try to follow a cafeteria approach. So cafeteria approach is small of this, small of that, but they don't go deep into that. So be prepared to face the supplementary questions also. So the depth is also required. If a question is asked and supposing another question is asked, you should be able to prepare to answer that also. So that is one, is depth. And the second thing is, whenever his question is asked, don't come out with the answer immediately. Let pause for a while. So red, amber, and then green. Only that is the, so immediately if you come out, you may not be in a position to come out with the correct answer. Thirdly, whenever you give the answer, particularly in respect of provocative questions, where one of the panelists may have one opinion, another may have another opinion, so give the pros and cons, like Reliance and the governor question. You see, there, instead of coming directly in favor of one argument, you could have given both the arguments. That some people feel one argument is this, the other argument is this, so that there is a balance. Okay, and then supposing the panelist persists in asking for your opinion, then you can come out with your opinion. But generally, I would like to advise you that whenever such a controversial question, for example, regarding corruption, Article 370, or for example, Ayodhya, or for that matter, reservation, these are all very, very controversial questions. Try to be on the right side of the government. Don't go follow a path which is, don't take risks in an interview. This is not a place to take risks. For risks, there is 35 years left with you in your service. You can take a lot of risks there, but not here. Okay. The last part is that whenever you give answers, always support it with examples. Examples are going to, make your answer very impressive, that you are aware about the applicability of that particular concept. So this is about how to answer the question. There will be a piece of paper and a pencil in front of you, and supposing you want to, gather your thoughts, you can take the permission from the chair and say that, can I use this paper and pencil? Write down your thoughts and then crystallize them into answers. If you do not know the question, once in a while, you can always say, I do not. Don't try to give wrong answers. That, the entire credit which you have earned goes otherwise. So this is the general thing. Now, one of the important thing which is likely to be asked, always it is asked, why civil services? You have done law, and why want to come? You can have, and every profession is important. If you give a reply that I want to serve the society, that reply will never be, taken at face value, because everyone is serving society. As an advocate, you can serve the society. As an engineer or as a doctor, everyone is serving. So the important thing you have to remember is that the civil service provides uniqueness in many areas. And don't talk disparagingly about any service. Just say that there is a uniqueness about this service. Number one, it provides leadership positions at a very young age. Challenging leadership positions of responsibility at a very young age. You become sub-regional magistrate. Supposing you go for IAS, sub-regional magistrate, collector, and then managing director, and so on. Second is, you are a part of the public policy making process. So, formulation of policy, implementation of policy, evaluation of policies. You are a part of that. The third is that it gives you a lot of exposure. So, your area, horizon is widened. Whether in IFS or in IAS or in any services, your horizon is widened. So, there is a much greater exposure. Fourth is that it gives you a lot of scope for creativity, innovation, which may not be possible in other services. So you can carry out a thing and see the results quickly. That is the fourth thing. And fifth thing, it is very satisfying because you can do a lot of good for the people of this country. Since you have opted for Indian Foreign Service, so you can talk about certain good things which are associated with the Indian Foreign Service. You will be in dialogue with other countries. That itself will, so many things you can see. So these are the answers to this question. Coming to some specific questions, just to tell you, since many questions may be asked on the IAS also. Don't think that only questions will be limited to IFS. So they may ask you about the role of the collector, the role of the district administration. The role of the collector are at least 24 roles are there, but concentrate on the core thing, that is the revenue administration, the magisterial functions, and the coordination functions, election, then disaster management, so on. So, and also find out the laws and the public policies for specific sectors of the society: women, children, senior citizens, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, handicapped, all the sectors of the society, what are the laws which have been framed, and similarly the policies. So this you should do. Coming to the specific questions, one or two questions where certain improvement in the answers could be given. So what attracts you to be so you said that I'm interested in being a diplomat. That's a very, which is fine, absolutely fine, but you can amplify it further also. Why? So you will be taking part in bilateral negotiation talks, so you should amplify that. Why? Just being a diplomat is something like saying that I am interested in power, prestige. That is not an answer to this question. You have to answer the question from the functions which you are going to perform. That is the core. Then pro bono and foreign law firms' opinions. Again, foreign law firms, instead of sticking to one particular viewpoint, give both the sides, the pros and the cons. And monitoring agencies, independence of judiciary. And again, when you collegiate the question was asked, instead of only defending the judiciary, always give both the sides. Well, it was felt that the person should not appoint oneself, anyone. And therefore, one school of thought is this. And but at the same time, I must say that you answered it slightly better, because you said that certain amendments, if they are made in the policy, so there were some vague words, which is fine. Colorable legislation, you were able to answer, and rule of mischief, you were not able to answer. So certain important things you have to keep in mind, because since law is your subject, so a lot many questions will come. And then international law enforcement is difficult. That's about it. And skits, your hobbies are too many, so be prepared to answer any question on that hobby. What is the social message which is given by their skits and the plays which are there? And legal aid society, how successful it is. And I had asked you about the monopolistic tendency. You must weigh, because someone in the panel may not like Reliance, or they may say no, but they are indulging in all these things. Give both the sides. And judicial activism is again an example question which is likely to be asked. What is the difference between judicial activism, judicial overreach, and judicial adventurism? Give example. Again example. And lastly, if they ask you what are the value systems which a civil servant must possess, so give those values: accountability, integrity, honesty, and support it with examples. Okay. So that's about it. And if you have any questions to ask, you can ask us.
So I think it's covered most of the doubts preemptively, but in the sense of I see that my answers are long, and it's the problem.
Yeah, slightly long. Yeah. So you can be, brevity is the wit, and go by the adage that less is more.
But in the sense, if I have to put off both the sides, usually it usually takes time. So is it like one argument, and then I should wait for the panelists to prompt?
Yeah. And one more thing, whenever you give answers, always prioritize your answers. Okay. So if an answer, there are 4 or 5 parts to the answer, speak that part which is the most important first. Then come to the second part and come to that's it. Okay. If you practice on those lines, everything would be fine. You are very good. There's no doubt about it. And we are very hopeful that you will get very good marks in the interview.
Thank you.
And of course, everything will depend on your written marks also. Yes. But here is an opportunity which has come to you first time, and you must take this opportunity, because if you get selected in the first attempt itself, you will go very high in terms of promotions and others also. And all the best to you. You have done well.
Thank
you
you.
will do very well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wear a suit.
Yes.
Wear a
Yeah,
suit
yes.
and be shaven.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Unacademy. Let's crack it.